All right. Thank you for joining us today for the NCLA podcast. I am the moderator for today. I'm Rachael Mann, and I'm the Director of Member Engagement for NCLA. And this is recorded. We invite you to share this out to folks who may benefit from this. This is something that we make available to all of our career technical education family and for our membership as well, of course. And I'm going to start off with introducing Eric Ripley, who I have the pleasure of serving on the NCLA board with, or actually was serving on the NCLA board, and now I'm working for NCLA, but he is still one of our board members, but also serving on the CTE board together. So Eric, I would love for you to take a moment just to introduce our panelists today.
Great, thanks, Rachael. I have the distinct privilege of being able to introduce today's panel, and these are three colleagues that I get the opportunity and privilege to work with here in North Dakota. And when Rachael had kind of put out a challenge to the NCLA board to say, think about a best practice that you could highlight from your state. Really, I think what we're doing in North Dakota around the concept of career-ready practices and trying to identify, again, those but maybe it'd be termed as soft skills or professional skills. How do we incorporate that as really an intentional part of our programs? I think it's great what we've developed. Not the brainchilds of this, but the three individuals that you have on here today are going to speak towards that effort, and I think could be a replicable strategy for your states as well. So in no particular order, I'm going to introduce them and let them take away the show. So we have Wayde Sick. Wayde is the State Director, Executive Officer for the State Department of CTE for North Dakota. Has done a great job in the leadership and vision provided to the state in advocating for CTE at the state level through the legislative session, both for programming support and financial investment. So we appreciate Wayde being with us today. Next, we have Michael Netzloff. Michael is a state specialist. He works for the Department of CTE for the State Department and specifically focuses on curriculum and standards. And really, Michael is kind of the author of the way that the career-ready rubrics are looking at. He has been the one that really grew this out from the ground level, can really speak towards the development of the standards and kind of the vision and focus behind them. And then we have Dale Hoerhauf. Dale is very respected as a director of CT for the Bismarck Public Schools in the Central Regional Area Career Technology Center. Dale is, as I indicated, about as respected as it gets, not across only the state, but the region and really at the national level. And Dale has one of the early pioneers of implementing the career-ready practices with his staff. And so, again, pleasure to have all three of these distinguished gentlemen on the call today.
Thank you so much, Eric. And I also want to mention to the folks tuning in, if you have best practices that are happening in your state or district and you would like to be featured on the webinar, we would love to have you on here because we all get better together as we share these best practices. And Eric, thanks so much for identifying the panelists and for putting this together and for being willing to share the great things happening in North Dakota. And I'm really excited about the conversation. I've been on the website a little bit and learned some about the career-ready practices. But Wayde, if you can start us off by sharing with us what the career-ready practices are, what's the vision behind it, and why they're important, and then we'll go from there.
Sure. Thanks, Rachael, and thanks, Eric, for the introduction. Truly a privilege being on the call today and have an opportunity to work with you and Dale and Michael as much as we do. So really, what the career-ready practices are, it's, as Eric said, the soft skills, those employability skills that for those of us that are in education, which we all are, or if you've been in workforce, which I was in workforce for a while, workforce development in my career, talking with employers, we continuously hear, what are you looking for in a new hire? What are you looking for in a student coming out of high school or coming out of college? And it almost seems like it's always the employability skills or the soft skills that comes up before the technical skills. In a previous position that I talked to employers a lot, and they would say, bring me somebody that can show up on time, wants to work, wants to learn, works well with others, and the technical skills, you bring some technical or some basic technical skills, and I'll teach them the rest. So I think that really plays in with what the career ready practices are and what career and technical education is all about. So Michael will talk about the origin of the career ready practices, and as Eric said, he was the author of the career ready practices. But these are just so vitally important because our economy is ever changing. The jobs are always changing. The skills that are needed are always changing, but the skills that are not changing are the career ready practices. Showing up on time, being responsible, working with others, being able to communicate. So no matter what our economy does, if a student possesses the career ready practices, they will be successful as the economy changes, as the workforce needs change. So the career ready practice is not a curriculum. We're not teaching students, it's not a class that they sit in and they learn how to be career ready practice successful. It's a set of standards. It's a rubric. And what instructors, successful career tech ed instructors need to do is they need to embed these career ready practices in everything that they do as they're teaching lessons, as they're teaching skills. They need to be addressing students on behaviors that do not reflect successful career ready practices. Now, Michael will talk about how the career ready practices have been around for a number of years and how they've rolled out and how they've gone from being very selective and being very piloted. Dale can talk about that, or we'll talk about that later. But with the passing of Perkins 5, North Dakota selected work-based learning as our performance indicator. And as we thought about how do we collect data, how do we ensure that students are successfully completing a work-based learning experience, it dawned on us, and it was probably Michael that brought it up. Why don't we use the career ready practices as the assessment to assess students as they successfully complete a work-based learning experience? And I think that's really the highlight. As simple as it is, that's kind of the highlight of our state plan, is taking something that really is, in my opinion, the portrait of a high school graduate, what a student should be able to do when they graduate from high school, the skills they should have. How about we embed that so that employers who have bought into the career ready practices use that as the assessment that either that instructor during a simulated work-based learning experience or an employer that actually has a student placed with them, they can evaluate that student on their successful attainment or successful completion of a work-based learning experience by showing that they are career ready through the career ready practices. Now, to go even farther, ESSA has been around longer than Perkins 5. Well, when ESSA was passed, the state adopted a framework called Choice Ready. And right now there's a set of essential skills in North Dakota that a student needs to accomplish in order to be considered choice ready. But then also, what pathway are they on? Are they on post-secondary pathway, a workforce pathway, or a military pathway? And when you look at the workforce ready pathway under our Choice Ready framework, which is a whole nother federal law, embedded in that is work-based learning and career ready practices. So we have successfully embedded the accountability measures of Perkins 5 and ESSA. So the Department of Public Instruction and the Department of Career and Technical Education, which in North Dakota are two separate agencies, we're very unique. We have partnered and saw that we need to integrate these two laws and the accountability. And if a student is successful through Perkins requirements, they're also successful through ESSA requirements. So it was a perfect marriage. One last thing before I'll turn it over to the experts. I do this a lot. I go 30,000 foot level and then I turn it over to the experts to fill in the blanks. But the last thing that I want to talk about the career ready practices is that the North Dakota Department of Career and Technical Education has bought into career ready practices so much so that about 2 years ago, we redrafted how we evaluate our staff. Our staff performance evaluations is based on the career ready practices. Michael is assessed on those. I'm assessed on those. Every staff in the Department of Career and Technical Education is assessed on the career ready practices. We are walking the talk. If our students can do it, we should be able to do the same thing. So that is my 30,000 foot level of the career ready practices. And I'll turn it back over to Rachael to continue the conversation. Thanks.
All right, thanks so much, Wayde. And I think Michael was going to share a little bit about this question as well.
Yes, I just wanted to reiterate what Wayde had said about the development of the career ready practice rubrics. Now, as he said, it was actually not I, but our former state director, Wayne Kutzer, who had come to me in 2014 and asked, what is there out in the United States that would measure the career ready practices? And of course, the career ready practices, those 12 set of soft skills were developed in 2012 by Advanced CTE, at that time a different name. But it was part of the CTE Common Core. They had developed the 12, put them out, and said, these are the sentences, these are what we value, but had not provided any detail to any of the 12. And it did not also provide any assessment. My director asked me, is there an assessment out there for our teachers to use? We know our teachers are doing things in their classrooms, having projects that incorporate the soft skills. How can we come up with a system that is unified and we can roll out to the state that would measure it across the board of how good a student is at doing these soft skills? And I did a lot of searching, put a lot of things together from different states, begged, borrowed, steal, all that kind of fun stuff as one does as an educator, and put together, with the help of a lot of other people, the career ready practice rubrics. Now, I'm going to try to share my screen here. Hopefully this will work. And I'm going to share with you just a short, what we call the short version of it. Hopefully you see it on your screen, nod your heads, and I'll see that you're, yes, okay. This is the short version of one of 2 pages of the 12. Under each of the 12, and here you see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We have them subdivided under each of the 12 to have student competencies. And as I said, this is the short version. The much longer version, which is a bunch of different words that one needs in a rubric. When you're creating a rubric, you have the student does so and so and so and so and so. We shorten that down to one word because, as anyone knows, when you're reading an instruction manual, you'll have the instruction manual, but once you start using it, you're probably going to just need a cheat sheet or something that's very short to remind you, oh yeah, that's what the big document said. Here's the short document. The first one for career ready practices are the responsible employee. As you see here, we have student competencies and they are divided into 12 different competencies under that one. We took this in front of many different groups. We took it in front of our staff, who are our staff at the state level, are our former teachers. We took it in front of different business groups and said, what do you think of this? Are these competencies, the student competencies, are these 12 valid? Should we include more? Should we include less? We talked to human resource officers. We talked to different state agencies and said, what are you thinking? Give us feedback so that we can build this. And this is truly the document, the short version of the document that came from that discussion. The other page, of course, is here. And they said some of them do need more definition, more breakdown, what it can mean to a student to say, yes, I did complete, for example, number 10, goals, plans. The student is proficient in having goals and different plans in their lives. 4, 3, 2, or 1, as most standard-based grading systems operate. 4 is for the high flyers. 3 is for students who are meeting the competency. 2 is you're not quite there, Billy or Susie. And 1, it's a little bit iffy if the student is alive in the classroom. There is no 0 in our system. So this is the short version for teachers to use, and this is what we developed in 2014. Really, we rolled it out to the state and had different educators give us feedback even at that point. We've been using it. We've even picked out of the 12 because there are a lot of different points to assess. We're saying at the time, these are the 8 of the 12 that are very important to us as an agency and across the state. And even in the 12, we are limiting from 8 down to 5 now with work-based learning, and say these 5 of 12 are truly the core of the core that are very, very important. You need to do these. And just in the development of saying to any student, any child, what you're learning in any class, CTE or otherwise, and don't get me wrong, these can be used in CTE or any other class, K through 12. We even had pilot schools that were in the elementary school using the system, and post-secondary. We worded the document to be used at any level in education and in non-educational situations as well. We said, do you learn the things in theory? That's your traditional grade, or some schools use standard-based grading. That's fine, that's a different grade. But are you learning to put that theory into practice? And that's what this model, this assessment, is helping the teacher to commonly assess across program areas, across subjects, saying, yes, they are not only learning the traditional grade, the theory of the item, but they are also learning now how to apply that theory. And from that, this document developed.
That is fantastic. And, I really, the whole concept, as Wayde was mentioning, about having the staff being evaluated in the same way and on the same basis, as I think back to when I was working for districts or working for the State Department, I didn't really know how other people were being evaluated. So I'm sure that resonates with students, because I'm assuming they know that everyone's being evaluated in the same way, or are they aware of that?
I think it really depends on the district and the school and how it's using that. But our goal and our main thrust of when we put out the system was that it would be taught to the students to know that these are the points that they would be evaluated on, and that they would be the same from class to class, from program to program, and from school to school across the state. We're not taking away any of these points from the west to the east in the state. We're not adding. These are the common goals and assessments for soft skills or career ready practices in the state of North Dakota. That is our goal when we put the document out.
Excellent. And for those of you who are tuning in to this webinar on demand, I want to share what's happening in the chat. And Eric Ripley shared that he just had an industry engagement meeting, and specifically the concept of students having more foundational skills and goals and plans was mentioned as an essential skill. So that's something to keep in mind as you're thinking about your work-based experiences for students. All right. And did anyone else want to speak to the career ready rubrics before we move to our third prompt? All right. All right. So next, I want to talk about how the career ready practices are implemented. What does this look like? And Del, I would love to hear from you on this one.
Yes, thanks, Rachel and others. Let me talk about how maybe we started. I'm going to hold up. We did a book study on the 15 fixes of grading, and this was written by Ken O'Connor, and it came up at the time. We did a study about 4 years ago, and we learned and we knew that in career technical education, teachers they'd like to grade students on, well, they didn't show up on time or they didn't do that. We should put that in the grade book. But if you read Mr. O'Connor's 15 fixes, and I agree wholeheartedly, we wanted to find out, we knew that career ready practices were important, but we wanted to separate what we considered their welding grade, how are they the welder, and then how are those career ready scores, let's put it that way. And so we spent some time as a staff. We have 2,000 students that come here this year to the Career Academy. And so for the past 4 years, we sat down as a staff and we looked at all the ones that Michael Netzloff just pointed out. And we said, listen, and it seemed a little overwhelming from our staff at the time. I said, let's take this slow. So what five would we look at as a staff? And we're going to do those well. We're going to score those well. And so we chose attitude, responsibility, communication, listening skills, and then teamwork. And so we decided how that was going to look. But what was really kind of interesting is as the teacher got into it, instead of using some of the teachers used the rubrics that were developed, but better than that, in fact, this week's kind of a great example. If you were here, when I walk around the classroom, the teachers are developing those rubrics with the students. So they use what I would call student-friendly language in the rubrics. Sometimes, the language is developed by by individuals that maybe students don't understand what those vocabulary words mean. So I find that really interesting where the students themselves are developing. So what is a 3 in responsibility? In other words, what would that look like? And so they're sharing that out. And so when they get to that point of scoring, then we're able to know. So anyway, the teachers use this, we said what we're going to do for sure, our minimum requirement was going to be once every quarter on those. And again, we've done this for the last 4 years, but it's really gone over well. I mean, I think our students are able to, so you will see a teacher sometimes walking around with a clipboard or whatever, and just kind of, that's the way the scoring is going. It could be in a project, it could be throughout the day, it could be something that they saw. And then they put some feedback on there of what they saw. This is why, this is the evidence I have why I thought you did good in responsibility. This is the evidence. So now we're to the point where students are self-monitoring. They are scoring themselves. And so that's really when you know you've kind of reached that. So students will score them. How do they do on that? And typically they really are really honest. And I think you'll find that students are really honest. And so they'll score themselves a 2 or something. They'll say, you know what? I could have done better in this area. I should have done that. Well, I think that's really the key, because now they got it. And so it's really been beneficial. So then what we've done is we've taken that and we send out our report cards each quarter and each semester. The parents get two scores. They'll get what the student is in the welder and what his career ready scores are. And I will tell you, just like our industry partners, and I know we're going to talk about that a little later maybe, but the parents really want to know, why did they get a 2? Why did they get a 3? They understand why they might have got a B or C in welding, but they want to know, what was it? Why did they score that 1, 2, or 3s? Because they know, and like everybody knows, the importance of it. So I think it's been really fun. It's been one of the best things I think we've done, because our staff meetings are about scenarios. So a teacher will bring in a scenario, and then we will try to score that as a group. What would that look like? Because I think it doesn't help if I'm scoring, I'm giving an example. If I score a scenario 3 and Michael, I'm looking at him now, it scores at a 1. I mean, there's something wrong. We're off base. And so the closer you can get what a 1, 2, and 3 means, I think is really important. So that's the way we've used it now for the past 4 years. And this year, you heard Michael talk about, and you heard Wayde talk about, there's some other ones that came out. And so we're going to add the ones that are part of the work-based learning, but that's not going to be a reach at all for our teachers. They get it. And many of our teachers are scoring on many more than the 5. They made 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, because now they kind of get it, Rachel. So yeah, it's been good for us.
And that's fantastic. And I'm not surprised that the students are scoring themselves harder than we would sometimes score them. So that it really shows that they're taking it seriously and they have a lot of self-reflection happening. And we do have a question in the chat from Larissa Shelkin. She's in Massachusetts, and she asks, if you could share your experience during COVID, were there any classes that were 100% online, or if you had a hybrid model? And that's open to any of the panelists.
Rachel, maybe I'll go, and I think probably Eric is. Yeah, I think we were basically in a hybrid model, but I think for the most part, we were 100% online. And I will tell you what, these career ready scores work well even in that, because if you think about responsibility, think about attitude. I'll give you one example. It's probably not a good attitude one. But, and I'm sure there's others that are out there, we had some students maybe in the morning that got on an early morning class, and they were, you could tell they were getting on from in bed actually. And, so their computer was on and they were in bed, and you think, wow, that's just, maybe that's not the best attitude to have today. So those whole things that you can score didn't change when we went to that fully online. So yes, we were 100%.
Yeah, and I can certainly answer from my perspective. And so I'm a CTE director for a school district on the east side of the state in Grand Forks. And last year we were very much hybrid model. And then there was a period of the school year where we were 100% online. But I certainly concur with Dale in that some of the same skills, communication, attitude, just teamwork. You could still demonstrate those through a virtual based process. I don't think that changes anything. And what we've seen as this pandemic continues is that's a reflection of the real world. That's a reflection of what we're doing today. We're doing a webinar utilizing technology, online skills. So again, to me, it doesn't just diminish the relevance of the career happening or the learning is occurring is an online format.
And just to add to the conversation, I'm not in the schools like Dale and Eric are, but looking at Michael's screen, I'm not that nice of a boss that I give lazy boys in his offices. Michael's working from home because Michael has the career ready practices. COVID has, even when COVID was before the Delta variant that's out there, we had staff working from home, and Michael is one of them because Michael possesses the career ready practices. He's evaluated on the career ready practices. So what COVID has taught us is that we can do our jobs almost anywhere. Some things are more difficult to do than others, and that's where that face-to-face is vital. But if anything, COVID taught is the importance of career practices, the importance of being a responsible employee, a responsible student, taking accountability for themselves because you're not in a classroom per se. So just wanted to throw that out there that to Eric's point, it's replicating what's going on in the world in the world of business. Google just announced today they're delaying their return to the office because of the uptick of cases.
Maybe Rachel and others, I'll add just one more thing to this. So, I talked about how the students developed some of the rubric. We did the same thing when we were online. In that same conversation, what would a 3 look like in responsibility online? And so it was really, really interesting what students came up with, what that meant. Some of it was that, maybe you need to, like listening, well, maybe you need to have your screen on so they can see you, so that might mean a 3, or, and if we call on you, you're gonna be there and you're not gonna be in the other room or something. So that to me, I'm going to say it again, to have students be able to come up with those rubrics, it's a fun assignment. It's an easy assignment in some ways, but it's a meaningful assignment. And online was the same way.
Well, and Dale, can you tell us a little bit about the advisory committee role in assessing the career ready practices over the past 4 years?
Well, all our programs, and Eric's is included, and we have advisory committee meetings. It was kind of interesting when we rolled out the career ready practices and we talked about it. We presented it at one of our electronics, if I recall, electronics advisory committee. There were 30 individuals from all over the state of North Dakota in our electronics advisory committee. And we were talking about, and I said that I went through that whole thing that we're scoring students in 2 ways. We're going to score them as how did they do in electronics, and then their career ready. So, you might have a C in electronics, but you're scoring 3s and 4s in responsibility compared to somebody that might get a A in electronics and they're scoring 2s in responsibility. And when I got done, the room was silent, and I thought, oh gosh, I don't think they like this, But you know what? It was just the opposite. They said, whoa, that's the way this should work. That is great. And so everybody kind of responded in. And so when we've rolled that out to our advisory committee, they get it, and they just thought that was one of the best things that they ever heard. And we all know, I mean, it is, but for them it was, I think, an eye-opener, an aha moment that maybe their schools are finally kind of getting that soft skill, professional skill, career ready score, whatever you want to call it. But so I would say anybody that's doing that, and you roll this out to your business employers or career or advisory committees, they're gonna give you a thumbs up. I'd be surprised if they wouldn't.
All right. And the next question, I'm just going to open this up to all the panelists, is did you encounter any resistance to this initiative? And if so, how was that resistance approached?
Well, I guess I'll take that because, we may get resistance from our friends Dale and Eric on the call. I think one of the big barriers or the big areas of resistance was just the size of the rubric. As Michael mentioned, it started as 12, and when it was rolled out, we looked at, in order to be career ready, practice ready, you had to successfully finish 8 of those standards, which means teachers are assessing students, every single student on all 8 standards. And you know, Dale and his instructors, they embrace that, and they used a version of what we rolled out, but that's a lot of work. So there's a lot of resistance just of the extra work that it may take to complete that rubric. You know, and that's one of the reasons why when we rolled it out as our work-based learning assessment is that we brought it back a little bit more, and we said, really, what are the true foundational? And we came up with those 5. Now, not the same 5 that Dale came up with, but pretty close. You know, I think 4 of the 5 matched, and I think he said, I can't remember which one you said that was different from ours, but you know, we said technical skills was important, and I think Dale had a different one. But to his point, he says it's an easy lift. Now that we're this far, we can just swap them out and do some additions. So I think the rubric is an area of resistance. You know, if you add up the 5 that we're requiring for work-based learning, it comes out to, Michael, remind me, like 42 or 43 competencies. But I guess to combat that issue, when I take my vehicle into to get it worked on or to get an oil change, they may do a 70-point safety check, before that thing rolls out of that bay. So if we are asking employers to fill this out, they're used to these checklists. They're used to of assessing the situation, assessing their employees quickly. And so I think employers will gravitate to this. I think another area of resistance, and Dale already touched on that, you know, you may have a student that gets an A in the class because they just catch on to the skills, but then they get a career ready practice rubric that says they're a 2, you know, and that can be a tough pill to swallow for a student and for a parent. But we need to be educating well-rounded individuals. I had a boss once told me when he talked to students about the importance of being employable, the best welder in the state of North Dakota might be sitting on their couch right now because they don't get along with others. They don't show up to work on time. They can't stay off their cell phone. So if we want to truly educate well-rounded individuals, we need to be able to have tough conversations and not be afraid to address somebody when their behaviors are not employable, because that is the point of education, whether it's gen ed or whether it's CTE. The point is to get that individual, that student, ready for the next stage in life. And we're not doing our jobs if they're not respectful, if they're not willing to work, if they're not willing to work with others, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that to combat or to address that resistance is, if the behavior doesn't change now, when is the behavior going to change? And hopefully it's not too late when they lose that first job.
You know, I'll just jump in real quick. You know, another group that potentially is, again, if you're a state that's looking to try to implement this, I'm really proud of the Department of CT for being the leaders. I always have viewed career and technical education as kind of being at the forefront of innovative and best practices, right? Everybody else is kind of catching up to what CT is doing. But this should not only just be a CTE implementation, right? There's no reason that this cannot be implemented in an English classroom, a math classroom, a science classroom, et cetera. And sometimes it's viewed as, well, this is a CTE only item. But again, to Wade's point, we want well-rounded students that have those career-ready practice skills, regardless of the path that they choose. It may be more of a seamless integration within career and technical education, but at the same time, it shouldn't be exclusively only for CTE.
That's exactly what Eric was saying when we built the system. I'm a non-CTE teacher, and that's what I formerly did, was outside of the CTE realm. So when I edited the document originally, I made very, very sure that the document could be used in an English room or a math room or a welding room and a fax room. That was one of the goals of the document. Wayde had also mentioned, and I've heard Dale talk about it too, the document helps with those students who are A students, but they're a 2 in our scale because they're just not living up to the soft skills. They don't have those skills to actually function in the job, even though they have it all in their head. The reverse of that is other types of students who are not really functioning well in the academic portion, the theory portion on tests, and they're getting possibly even a D as a regular grade, but you know that they're a great kid. They do anything for you, and their skills for the knowledge portion are just not there, but potentially because they possess the soft skills, which this rubric will measure, you can score them a 3 or possibly even a 4. And that shows the reverse side of application and knowledge.
All right. And for those of you, again, tuning in to the on-demand recording, the Daphne Hyde is from North Dakota, and she shared a link to the lengthy version, and I will include that in the YouTube notes so you can access it there. But she says, I appreciate the length and having the flexibility to pick and choose from it. So, so it may be seen as a hindrance to some, but for others, they really appreciate that piece. All right. And the next question I have is, what advice do you have for states that are interested in creating something like this in their career tech ed programs?
I would actually have to say, please just take, borrow, steal, take what we've done. Don't recreate the wheel. Don't, it's like, it's yours for the taking. Just take it, people. Okay. It is free. Blessings to you.
And did you want to share your PayPal link or anything? Your Venmo? No, I'm kidding.
I guess what I would like to add to that is I wasn't with CTE when this was put together, but I was fortunate enough to work for another state agency that was a close partner to Career Tech Ed and Wayne Kutzer. I worked in workforce. I worked directly with employers. And when Mr. Kutzer came to me and said, Wayde, how do we get this in front of employers? That's what I helped him do, not only at the local level with Dale and Eric, but at the state level, the number of employers that I had access to. So I guess my point is, if a state's going to do this, get the employers to back it, because we need to get past that education does this and workforce where employers need this. We have a miscommunication, but we're saying the same thing, but we're saying it differently. So if we're able to go to employers and say, this is what we're calling it in education, what do you call it? And is this important? And if we're all calling it the same thing, then there's power in there, there's value in there. Those employers that are on those industry advisory committees are going to go to your programs and say, you need to implement the career ready practices because you're doing awesome on the technical skills, but your students, go back to the don't show up on time, can't have a conversation without looking at their shoes, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Get employers to show that it's a value, that business community is going to be your ally.
I will add to what Wayde just said. I'll give you an example. We have a bobcat industry here in Bismarck, and they wanted some of our welders, students right out of high school. They had the standards. These students are good. These are 17, 18 years old. But what they wanted to know is they wanted to see their career ready scores. And so it gets right back to what Wayde said. And so these students, they scored 3s in all those types. I mean, it didn't take these employers a second actually, to hire them. So they're hired this summer. They're working full time as welders out at Bobcat, and they're coming to us in the morning. But again, what they're asking for is they want to see those career ready scores. And so I think when you can get to the point where your employers are starting to ask for the career ready scores and wanting to look at that, that's important. And I think Eric probably does this too, but we use it for our National Technical Honor Society. That's one of the first criteria we use in the next National Technical Honor Society student. What are those career ready scores? I mean, that's really big because it's going to fall into all those other things. Yeah, okay, you're 3.5 and everybody's going to be that, but really it's those career ready scores. So I would say that this is I think it's a no-brainer when it comes to career and technical education. And maybe I'll give one more example and I'll kind of keep quiet, but if you've got a carpentry program, I'll give you another example as a carpentry program. You're out there building a house. It's tough sometimes for that carpentry instructor to score students on what they're doing. It's easy to score them on responsibility, attitude, almost on a daily basis, because that's what they're doing on the job site. And so I think that's a great way of looking at also. So again, to answer your question, I think it's a no-brainer for career and technical education.
Excellent. And Daphne also shared a link to the Career Ready Practices website, so I'll be sure to add that as well. All right. And did any of the other panelists want to add to this one? So what advice do you have for folks who are wanting to create something like this in their state or district or in their context?
I can certainly jump in a little bit here. I would echo Michael's comments. I think the term in education is beg, borrow, and steal. Why reinvent the wheel? But I'm sure it's not just unique to North Dakota and not unique to advisory committees that we have. But what I often hear from our advisory committee partners is give us the student that can do the things that Dale had alluded to. And if they're missing a technical skill, we can train them in that. But we can't train a student to show up on time and to be a good team, team player or, problem solving. Those are skills that we need them to already have coming to us. And so I think that the use of the career ready practices can help bridge that gap and helping students to be better prepared for what their next step is after your programs.
All right, thank you, Eric. And Susan from Arizona, who I have had the pleasure of working with for many years, she says that she appreciates the great work-based learning items that you're sharing. And let's see. All right, okay, so let's talk a little bit about stakeholders and business and industry. We've talked some about this already, but how are they involved, and what are the types of work-based learning opportunities that were mentioned on the website for sustained interactions and simulated environments? And can you explain a little bit about the difference between the two? And again, I'll just open that up to the panelists to chime in.
So I'll start, because those are state definitions. We went straight from Perkins 5 and Perkins 5 stated that there were two options, either a sustained interaction or that simulated interaction or simulated experience. As far as the sustained interaction, that's traditionally what we think of when it comes to work-based learning. And Dale and Eric will probably have hundreds of examples that they can bring up. Dale already actually threw a number out already. But we want that student to be placed with an employer, whether it's an internship, a pre-apprenticeship, a placement of some sort, paid, unpaid, because I think a student gets more value of that honest day's work of I learned something, I'm applying it, and they have somebody else that's excited about their learning outside of their parent and their teacher and their counselor. You have somebody else. So there's lots of examples. One that's probably most widespread is the supervised ag culture experiences that we have in our ag education programs across the state. Those are alive and well in North Dakota, have been, and they will continue to be. And that's a perfect example of a sustained interaction work-based learning. But we also felt that it was important to have the simulated work-based learning experience as well. And when you hear simulated, the first thing you think of is virtual and the types of things like that, which is obviously an option. But when we thought simulated, we thought, in rural North Dakota, or even in the larger communities, you just can't get every single student with an employer. There's just not enough employers to go around. And in rural North Dakota, you just don't have the economic base to place a student. But I don't think we ever thought about bringing in simulation, virtual simulation in as an idea, even though obviously that's a possibility. But back to Dale's point of his building trades program, and most of the building trades programs across the state, they build a house, whether they build it on site at the school or the center, or if they have a lot that the students are bused to every day and they work there for a couple hours. That's a simulated work-based learning experience. You may not be placed with an employer, but you're doing work-based learning. school-based enterprises with our marketing and our business education programs. If you're running a school store, that's a work-based learning experience. Our child development programs, and also we started an education pathway a couple of years ago. Dale was a part of that conversation when it first kicked off in Bismarck, and then also in our Fargo area, there's an education pathway. When those students start learning how to become a teacher, which is that education pathway is all about, get them into a classroom and let them experience what it is to deal with students, because all of us as educators, your first experience as an educator and being placed might have been in some sort of practicum when you were in college, which unfortunately for some, that's too late. So let's get them in high school. That's the whole idea about career and technical education, is not only find what you enjoy, but find out what you don't enjoy. And sometimes the classroom may disguise the pros and cons. You get out into a work-based learning experience, whether it's simulated or an actual work-based learning experience, then you really learn if this is for you or if it's not for you. So that was in our mindset when we embraced both the work-based learning, the sustained interaction, and the simulated experience. But Dale and Eric, definitely the experts, because they have very strong programs at both of their schools and their centers.
Well, I appreciate that, Wayde. I mean, I think you said it real well, and that the idea would be is how can we identify and provide work-based learning opportunities in all CTE program areas. There are some areas that maybe lend themselves more to that than others, but the opportunity to provide some simulated work experiences, even internally within our schools, as Wayde referenced, school stores. Our IT program, one of the examples is our, and I know I've seen this in other districts as well, is they serve as kind of a help desk, right? Or within the school. That is an internal, non-paid, but very much a entry-level type of work experience that blends itself well with the skills the students are learning in our IT technician program. And so how can we identify those and provide those experiences for students? Because again, it's about connecting, to me, the classroom with what is next for them. And if they're interested in that pathway, they're going to make a better educated decision on what that next level of training or education is needed. And hopefully we can start that awareness and education piece at the high school level. And so to me, that's what work-based learning experiences are all about. You stay in education long enough, and the best ideas just come circling back around. Back when I was in school, it was cooperative work experience. And we've kind of rebranded it as work-based learning, but it's the same concept. It worked back then when I was in school. It works now for kids. And to me, it's the best practice for CTE.
What I would do, and I'll just add to what both Eric and Wayde said. And I know Daphne's on the line here, but exactly what Eric was saying is where we've got students in those IT and helping out in the schools, and they're doing that. But one of the things we talked about at Bismarck Public Schools is we talked about all these students going out and maybe to workplaces, and we step back and say, well, wait a minute. If Bismarck Public Schools has 13,000 students that come here, and maybe that we as an employer should be having those students in our schools instead of just sending them out. They can work, they can be get work-based learning experiences in many different areas of the school ourselves. And so I really like that idea where the schools now, Bismarck Public Schools is taking on having those students be part of those, whether they're working in IT in our schools around town, or example, we've got graphic arts students that are at our print shops working one-on-one, developing some logos and stuff right in our school district because they need that. And so almost the school themselves is hiring or having these students being part of that. So I don't think we should overlook where the schools themselves become the work-based learning opportunity.
I guess I would just like to add, back to an earlier statement that I had, that we had to walk the talk. That's a perfect example of the school districts walking the talk. If you believe in your students so much that you're willing to put them out into the community with employers, then you better be willing to place them in your school district at your center to fulfill a need. Our students, something they talk about with this generation so much is that they want to give back. Well, this is an opportunity for them to give back to their school district, give back to their community. So I wholeheartedly agree with Eric and Dale's comments. And I'm proud to say that one of those graphic design students that Dale's talking about, that's my older daughter. She's in it and she's loving it. So we got to be able to talk or walk the talk as well.
All right. And I want to mention, even here in Arizona, one of the districts I worked for years ago, we were making money from our school-based enterprise, and we were able to use those funds to hire 2 of our top students to become interns. And they were able to, make a little side money and continue to develop their resume and their skill set while still being at school. So it was a really cool opportunity for them and mutually beneficial as well. All right. Now we have just a few minutes left, so I would like to see if anyone has any questions that they would like to pose to our panelists, or if you'd like to unmute and share something related to this that's happening in your context. So feel free to either share in the chat and I'll relay the questions or anything you would like to share, or if you'd like to unmute and share the question.
I guess I'll use this opportunity. First, I would like to say hats off to all of you. I'm in awe of what educators and CTE are doing, and just you are the heroes in every community. And although I'm from Massachusetts, I know we are really proud of our educators, but warm greetings from Massachusetts, from our hearts to yours, from our families to yours. So be safe and well, and just know that you're really doing something that really affects so many young students, and for the rest of their lives they would treasure that experience, communicating, learning, just being and learning from all of you. So thank you. And just a quick question, since we don't have too much time left, I just would like to hear from every one of you who would like to share what is next for you. What is your wish list? What is your I don't know, lighthouse, if you will? Where are you heading next? What it is that what is inspiring you? Where are you going? So just from the perspective that sharing everything with each other, sometimes we can really help each other. So that's my question. What's next for you? Thank you.
What's next for us? What isn't next for us? I think what's next for us is, we have Dale and Eric on the line, and they're 2 of the best in the state. And unfortunately, it's not the norm across the state of what these 2 are doing. They're pockets of excellence. I use that term a lot. And there's other pockets of excellence in the state. But what my next step is to make what's going on in Dale's neck of the woods and Eric's neck of the woods and others, that's the norm. And Eric and Dale, they gravitated towards the career ready practices shortly after they rolled out, knowing that they were important. There's a lot of school districts that haven't done it. They haven't done it yet. They didn't see the value in it. So our next step of making it almost mandatory to use the work-based or the career ready practice as the rubric to assess work-based learning, which is the indicator of success for CTE in the state of North Dakota. We are forcing everybody to adopt to career ready practices. And it's a terrible way of saying it, but it's the reality. We see these as important, and we're strongly encouraging everybody to move that direction as well. Another next step is we got to make it easier. We have a career exploration platform that we have across the state that's available to every 7th grader on up, widely used in many school districts, if not all school districts. What we need to do, and we're working on doing this, is creating a work-based learning module that that would have employer access. So if a student was placed with an employer, not only, well, let me back up. This resource would not only connect that student with an employer to get them out there, so that would be almost a match.com instead of having all the legwork being done by Eric and Dale's staff. Have some sort of algorithm to help make that match, make those recommendations. But then also when that student is placed, having an employer to have access to that so they can do that assessment, provide feedback back to Eric and Dale and others on that successful completion, but then also migrate into our student data system so that that would automatically check the box. So so we're working on some automation of data collection that would go straight from the employer into our school data system so that Dale's staff and Eric's staff doesn't have to grab a paper assessment and then enter those scores, so that staff or students and programs get credit for the good work that they're doing.
Maybe I'll go real quick on that, then. That's a great question. Where we're heading is, let's just call it, we're going to be a full competency-based school, and I'll use a better term, I think sometimes, is personalized learning school. That's where we're heading. That's what we're going to do. And to do that, we're going to have stackable credentials. But part of that stack, there's no question in my mind, part of the stack is going to be the career ready practices. And so you might be this, you might be this, you might be this, but you're going to have to see, and it gets back to what Wayde said, that report card, that transcript, whatever you want to call it, will show you the stackable where you're at, but it will certainly show where you're at on that career ready score. And so that would be part of that personalized learning competency base, because we all know it's not about seat time. It's about learning time. And so that's the direction we're going. And I think use of the career ready practice is going to be one of the avenues that get us there.
Yeah, and I'll just jump in real quick. One of the things that is kind of exciting for our state right now is that there was a significant investment of funds by our state legislature via some federal funds received to invest in the expansion or development of new CTE facilities across the state. And that's pretty exciting. Dale has a beautiful facility out there in Bismarck. He's got huge interest. Probably the demand exceeds the space that he even has. I'm sure he's interested in expanding upon what he has available. We in Grand Forks in my region are certainly interested in that opportunity, and how can that investment of funds benefit the opportunities for students both within our community and surrounding communities to have access to CTE. And in designing and building a facility is exciting, certainly, but even more exciting from my standpoint is building and designing program practices as the foundational platform for any program of curriculum that gets developed in that. And so to me, there's a lot of attention right now being placed on that as it's an application to the state, and we're working hard on that. But yeah, exciting times for CTE.
I guess my next step is whatever my boss Wayde Sick tells me to do is my next. No, I'm kidding. No, not actually. But I think with the development of the rubrics, really, and being there from the get-go of the whole program, I feel that I'm kind of like the keeper, and it has developed a common language. And I really try to promote that we keep it so that we have a common language among all educators, through all programs across the state, with business leaders, and then we're not changing things in it, because then it stops being common. And so that's really what I try to do with the topic that we're talking about today.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Larissa, for that well thought out question. And thank you so much to each of our panelists. I know that this is such a busy time of year, so I really appreciate you taking the time to share what's happening in North Dakota, and also just being so generous with these resources and allowing folks to replicate this in their context and to directly use those in their states and districts as well. And for the folks, again, who are tuning in, please reach out to me if you would like to be on a webinar to feature what's happening in your state or district. You can reach me at info@ncla-cte.org. And again, please feel free to share out this recording with folks that will benefit from it. All right, and I will see you guys next time.